We dissect the first debate in the race for Las Vegas mayor, plus her district, often considered the most competitive in the state. Congresswoman Susie Lee joins us on the economy, immigration, reproductive rights, and more this week on Nevada Week.
Support for Nevada Week is provided by Senator William H. Hernstedt.
Welcome to Nevada Week. I'm Member Renee Dixon. In the race for Las Vegas mayor, a recent poll showed 16% of voters support former Democratic Congresswoman Shelley Berkeley, 12% support Republican City Councilwoman Victoria Seaman, and 7% support City Councilman Cedric Creer. At the Fontainebleau is where these three frontrunners took part in a debate that John Ralston, CEO of the Nevada Independent, moderated. And here now to evaluate how each candidate performed are Sondra Cosgrove, College of Southern Nevada history professor and executive director of Vote Nevada, and Warren Hardy, former Republican state senator and principal consultant for his firm, Warren Hardy Strategies. Thank you both for making the time. You both watched there on Wednesday night. And tell me, Sondra, who performed the best in your opinion and why?
So I think Councilman Creer did the best at using the time that he was allocated to talk about things that he's done and things that he would like to do. He was able to get into kind of the weeds a little bit and do some detail before he got cut off because that was kind of the format. But I actually think he performed the best. What about you?
You know, I would agree with that. I would start by saying that I don't think anybody hurt themselves. And that's, from a candidate perspective, that's what you want to go in. The debates are not fun because really the only thing you can do is end your candidacy with it. I think Councilman Creer did the best job of using the time that was available to talk about what he's done in his district. He was very organized with that. You could tell he had thought that through and really sort of pushed through some of John's stop signs to be able to get those points out.
When we talk about getting in the weeds on issues, what issues are there that mayors really can have an impact on? So let's say that he is elected, will he have that kind of same impact?
I think especially for him because he's coming out of Ward 5, and that's where you've got the concentration of homelessness, people who are mentally ill, problems with having to provide them wraparound services. And that is a very local issue that you can have an impact on. And so I think that's one of the reasons I think he came across as being more organized is because that is an issue that's related to economic development and education. And so he was able to zero in on it. And I think he could have an impact.
What do you think people should know about the power of a mayor?
Well, I mean, it depends on the city, obviously. But in this case of the city of Las Vegas, it is somewhat of what's the word I'm looking for, a ceremonial position. But a good mayor, and I think we saw this with Mayor Lee in North Las Vegas, a good mayor can set the vision for the city. And a good mayor can then count votes, can bring his or her colleagues along and work towards a collective goal of the city. And so really when I look at a mayor, who will make an effective mayor, I look at a person that will have the ability to coalesce people behind them because they don't have the same sort of touch or influence that they do in a district and the vote. So their job is to be really good at organizing people, and that's what you ought to look at. And I think, frankly, that you've got three candidates that are probably pretty good at that.
When we talk about, well, off camera, we had talked about the bully pulpit role and its importance. How crucial is that? And did this debate answer who would be the best in that regard?
I mean, again, I actually think the debate format might have outlived its usefulness because being adversarial against each other doesn't really tell me what you would look like as a leader. And so I think just based on what we heard, any one of them, especially in a state where you have every other legislative session and there's kind of a vacuum of leadership voices there, could step into a crisis, could step into some type of, like Warren said, that they were going to get around some type of initiative. I think any of them could have done that.
Okay, and do you agree about the format? And to be fair, this was labeled as a forum, not a debate.
I think that's to Sondra's point. They're sort of moving away from the debate. Yeah, because I think, Cedric's performance was sort of illustrative of this, that the focus is you get your talking points, you go, regardless of what's going on around you, regardless of what the discussion is, you get those talking points out. That's not really useful. But the bully pulpit is the tool, and I think that's where Mayor Goodman's have been successful, and particularly Oscar, in able to use that bully pulpit to set a general vision, and people, because of his popularity, were a little afraid not to coalesce behind him. The same thing happened with Mayor Lee, and that's where an effective mayor can make a big difference. So when I say it's ceremonial, in terms of structure and logistically, it's ceremonial. In terms of potential influence, with the right person, the influence can be significant.
We've talked about in what area Cedric Creer did well. Let's talk about one of the other candidates. Who do you want to start with? Victoria Seaman. Where do you think that she came off strongly?
So one of the things that I've heard Victoria bring up a number of times is the Children's Hospital in Cashman Field and the Grant Sawyer Building. And I think that's where, if you asked her for a plan that she's thought out, it's that one. And so I would like to know, I'm going to probably talk to her a little bit more about that. How far are you? What would it take? But I think from her, it was that idea about having a children's hospital for that medical district.
Which we've had doctors on this very show talking about how necessary that is for Southern Nevada.
And to her credit, it may be and she has been talking about it for a long time. You can't have a conversation with her when she doesn't bring it up. So she's focused on something that's exceptionally, critically important. And I think in terms of her debate performance, she did a really good job of staying disciplined and staying focused. Because I thought, to the extent anybody was attacked by the moderator, it was probably her. And she stayed disciplined. She stayed focused. I think she did a good job. And I agree with Sondra that issue is the one that can sort of bring her through.
And the attack on her by John Ralston involved some of her campaign materials. I forget the exact wording, but pro-criminal
syndicate or something.
That there are people out there in power that are pro-criminals. Something to that effect. You don't think that was fair?
Well, I don't know if it's not fair. I mean, I think before I called it a cheap shot. I mean, it's fair game because it was in her campaign literature. But who doesn't, who isn't hyperbolic in their campaign literature, right? You're trying to grab the attention of the folks. And she's not wrong. She might have been wrong about calling it a wasteland and pro-criminal. She's not wrong. We've got a challenge there. We've got something there. And she's known to sort of, talk about things in very dramatic ways. So it was very interesting to me, especially that Shelley Berkeley sort of went down the line and agreed with her across the board. The only thing she didn't agree on is that she should call it a wasteland. So it's a problem. It's a challenge. And I think that we've got a sheriff that's really doing a good job at this, but it's still a problem that has to be addressed by the council.
Well, and you've got, she's probably would be considered the more conservative or Republican candidate, whereas Shelley Berkeley and Cedric Creer would be more left, maybe a little more Democratic. Victoria could pull this off if she can coalesce a lot of the independent vote and the Republican vote. So I think that's where she was aiming for. Again, probably went a little overboard in the language.
Yeah, I mean, that's clearly her ticket to the general.
Well,
right.
When you're talking about this problem, this wasteland, am I correct in interpreting the argument she was making is that homelessness, we may become the next LA, for example? Or was she was also talking about property crime?
I think she was talking about crime in general in a very aggressive way, which is what the public wants to hear. Victoria Seaman is a very talented campaigner and a very talented politician, and she understands that that's how you grab. So I think she was talking about everything.
She has law enforcement endorsements.
And she does have law enforcement endorsements. The key here is to make sure that people understand it's a mistake to drill down on a specific issue like that. Because, were you talking about this? Were you talking? Yeah, were you talking about this? Were you talking about that? Yes, I was talking about all of that.
Or did the consultant make that, and maybe you wouldn't have said it that way, or
right? But I can hear. I've known her for a long time. I can hear her saying that, sitting across the table at lunch. But it identifies everything, and that's a smart thing to do politically, so the public understands when they say, "Well, she's talking to me." Now, my issue is homelessness, or my issue is immigration, or my issue is gangs, or my issues is, homicide. Yeah,
What you
that's
want
it.
from what she
Pull what
said.
you want from what I said.
What did Shelley Berkeley do well?
I mean, obviously, Shelley Berkeley just has so much experience, broad breadth of everything that she's done. And so, I mean, her main point was no matter what comes up, I've probably been involved with that issue in some way. And so it's not going to be something new to me. And, you know, I mean, Ralston kind of said, you know, do we want maybe fresh blood? Do we want like the outsider? And I think she was able to say, I'm a little bit on the outside because I haven't done anything local. But on the other hand, I know all these issues really well.
Yeah, I never understood that whole outsider argument. I mean, you need people that understand and who have been through this, and you want it. Why all of a sudden in politics do we not want experienced people?
Well, it's like term limits.
Yeah.
Oh, it sounded nice, not working out.
Don't get me started on term limit. It's the worst thing. It's
There's plenty
from one about a half hour.
to
Yeah.
arrive.
And I agree on that.
But Shelley Berkeley, it was really interesting with her because she didn't have to say a thing for you to look at her on stage and say, she's got experience. She knows what she's doing. She really has that ability. And then when she speaks, it just backs that up.
You know, she could pull her phone out and go, who do you want to talk
Yeah,
to?
Right.
It was,
I mean,
it was interesting because she and not just in Nevada, but throughout the country.
Exactly.
But that outsider perspective, you say you need an insider to be effective. However, both of you are also hearing that there is some upset that Kara Jenkins was not included in this forum. There are how many? 14 candidates.
There's a lot. It's an open primary race, so you get lots of choices, but that's a lot of candidates.
Yeah, you've got the big three, and those are the ones that are on the stage. From what I can tell, just sort of anecdotally around town, she's Anderson is really sort of building a machine out there, and it's going to be very interesting to see. Excuse me. Yeah, sorry.
Because I mean, if you're on Instagram, she and all her young supporters were out last night having their own campaign event. Young people were upset that the Black woman was not on the stage.
Here's a tough one. Does the next mayor of Las Vegas need the endorsement of the Goodmans?
Not going to hurt.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think it's going to kill them either if they, and I can see the Goodmans just staying quiet. You know, there's probably conversations going on behind the scenes, but I don't see either one of them with a thumb out on the scale.
Yeah, I think everybody would love to get it. I think at some level that's going to give a significant event depending on who it is, right? You've got to have a campaign in order. You've got to be a good candidate. You've got to be. I think any of the three front runners would benefit tremendously from a Goodman endorsement.
But again, this is one of our open primary races because half our races are already open primary. And I like the fact that there's a lot of people that were willing to step up and run. I think we're going to have to figure out as more and more people like, yeah, I should run. How do we get more people on that debate stage? How do we allow more people to speak without it taking 9 hours of listening to people giving speeches? But I think we're going to get a lot of young people who are eventually going to say, I don't see anybody that represents me right now. I should run. Yeah. And we should probably hear from them in some way.
Last question I think was asked at the forum or debate was, who are you going to vote for president?
Yeah, we all saw those faces.
Yeah.
They're in the headlights. Oh my gosh.
What kind of impact, they all answered, what kind of impact do you think those answers will have on what voters decide to do?
I mean, I think each of them were thinking, what do my voters want me to say? Who's my voter out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think when it first happened, I thought that was a cheap shot by John to do that. But in reality, I know why he did it, and he was probably right to do it because that's something that can sort of help the public cut through where these people really stand on the issues. The thing that was interesting to me was the level at which they, through the certainty of their answer, sort of defended both candidates. That's risky, you know, to defend President Biden or former President Trump to that degree, to say, yes, absolutely, that's my person, without saying, you know, I might do some things different, but he is certainly a better candidate.
And I thought it was interesting that Shelley Berkeley said this is a nonpartisan race. And so, I mean, there's something to be said about having some nonpartisan space sometimes. And I think that's why I was like, all of a sudden, oh, here's a partisan question.
For the record, Victoria Seaman said she would vote for former President Trump. Cedric Creer, as well as Shelley Berkeley, said President Joe Biden. The primary is June 11th, and if no candidate in this race gets more than 50% of the vote, the top two will go to the November general election.
Correct.
All right. Thank you both for your time. We move now to Nevada's 3rd congressional district, a highly competitive seat, which Democratic Congresswoman Susie Lee has won in 3 straight elections. What issues threaten to unseat her this election year? We asked her that and more. Let's start with the economy. According to the Pew Research Center, nearly 3/4 of Americans say that strengthening the economy should be the top priority of Congress this year. First, how would you describe the state of the economy right now?
Well, listen, I represent an incredible, hardworking people in Southern Nevada, very resilient, but many of them are struggling with the cost of groceries and gas. And so they do want to see Congress actually getting to work to do things that will deliver some form of relief. And I'm proud to say that we delivered on the Inflation Reduction Act, which cut the cost of health care, cut the cost of prescription drugs. We certainly have more work to do, especially here in Southern Nevada with respect to housing. But my constituents want to see that we're actually working on it, that we're addressing the economy.
Is the issue of the economy the biggest threat to your reelection, do you think?
Listen, there are so many issues that people talk about with respect to my election. I think that I represent a district, as you know, that's one of the most competitive districts in the country. There is a lot of outside spending that comes in to try to flip this seat from Democrat to Republican. And I think that people have seen, many of my people, the people I represent, are not partisan. They understand that so many issues are nuanced. They're not black and white. And they just want to know that they have someone in Washington who's willing to work across the aisle, who's willing to get into the weeds, who isn't on Twitter, who isn't out on national news all the time. I'm actually in back rooms working with Republicans, which is why I've been ranked the most bipartisan member of Congress.
One of your potential opponents is a video game music composer, Marty O'Donnell, and he says that illegal immigration is part of what's hurting the American economy, saying big corporations have kept paychecks down by hiring illegal immigrants and paying them lower wages. American workers are getting squeezed. What do you think of that claim?
Well, I think Marty should talk to his own party, because we had a bipartisan border security bill that was ready to pass the Senate, that had been negotiated for months and months and months. And the former president sends a tweet basically saying, we can't solve this problem because it's such a good campaign issue. And this has been the problem with immigration reform, because it has been used as a political football for decades.
So you say he should speak with his own party, yet you are also calling out the leader of your own party, President Biden, with a letter, one of 15 House Democrats, to sign a letter to him asking that he take executive action on the U.S. border with Mexico. What specifically would you like him to do?
That letter is, I'm like, let's get all hands on deck here. And we know that the president has executive action he can take, but the problem is this isn't a first choice. This is a last choice. This is just bringing all tools in the toolbox to bear here on this issue. The problem with executive action, unfortunately, it will probably see a legal challenge. It will be held up in the courts for months and months. Again, I keep going back to, we have a bipartisan bill that, by the way, the president was a part of those negotiations. And if they really are serious about border security, let's bring that bill to the floor and get it passed and get investments into our border.
Now, you did sign that letter, but did you not also vote for a resolution denouncing the Biden administration's immigration policies?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit stronger than just, this is our second option.
Yeah, no, I understand. I think that we need to all understand when it comes to immigration reform, we need to have rules. People need to have consequences if they break those rules. But we also need to have a system that people, if they prove that they should be here, that decision will be fair and fast and final. And that those people who do make it into our country via asylum, or however, there are other ways for people to come to our country. Right now, asylum happens to be the only legal pathway that tends to be used by most people. But also they need to have work requirements when they get here to make sure they get to work and start contributing to our economy. And speaking of our economy, we need immigration. We need legal immigration. We need people to come here. I'm in my community, whether I'm talking to a small business, some restaurants are closing their restaurants on Wednesday night or Thursday night because they don't have enough servers. I hear it from big businesses as well. We need workers. So this is an immigration reform is an issue that Congress has failed on for decades.
When you talk about work requirements, where do you stand on electronic verification of a potential employee?
I support Verify.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay. And how would you describe the state of the border right now?
Listen, there are so many pressures for people wanting to come to the United States. Climate is having an impact. Corrupt governments are having an impact. The border is a crisis at this point. And I'll say it again. We have a solution. It has been negotiated. Mike Johnson could put it on the floor tomorrow and it would pass and we could get it to the president's desk. We could get $20 billion into border security. We could hire more asylum judges. There would be more detention beds, more CPP agents. So we have it. I keep saying, Republicans, if you're serious about this issue, then they should be writing a letter to their leader asking for a vote on this.
What are you hearing from potential voters about what matters to them right now? Are they talking about immigration?
Absolutely. Immigration, cost of living is an issue. I hear a lot about water, obviously being in southern Nevada. And we can't ignore access to abortion. Even though we are in a state where abortion is protected, we know that there were 115 bills introduced last Congress trying to restrict abortion nationwide. We know that that is a potential. Should Democrats lose control of the House and the Senate and the presidency, that a national abortion ban will be on the docket. And we've seen it in state after state since Roe v. Wade has gone down, went down. Think about this. A third of women in this country who are childbearing age, 1/3 live in states where abortion has been banned or severely restricted. And that is an issue that is very important, especially and it's not just for women. Men care about this issue too, because it's a freedom issue. It's a freedom of choice issue, making sure that women are able to make the choices. It's a very, very personal, very complicated decisions. I suffered 3 miscarriages. Both of my children were conceived via IVF. I understand very intimately that pregnancy and reproductive care is a very delicate issue that should be between a woman and her doctor.
And when you heard about efforts to restrict access to in vitro fertilization, having utilized this yourself, what did you think?
I always said when Roe v. Wade went down that this isn't just about Roe v. Wade. This is about controlling women's bodies. And the IVF I knew was going to be on the chopping block. And Alabama, with their Supreme Court decision, made it clear. And listen, infertility is an illness and IVF is a treatment. And just like abortion is a reproductive care treatment, it is a tool in a toolbox that doctors should be able to have, that women should be able to choose. And no politician, I don't care if it's in the Alabama Supreme Court or in the halls of Washington, D.C., should be involved in that decision except for a woman and her doctor.
But you did say that this issue impacts men as well.
Absolutely.
And for the right to an abortion, there are fathers who will say, I don't want her to have that abortion.
And that is a decision that they should be able to make on their own.
The woman.
Yeah, the woman, and yes.
Not the father, because a
they
father
should be
would
involved
claim...
together.
Okay. All right. The last thing I would like to talk about is there's this interesting dynamic of this public lands bill that you have proposed. How would it address the housing issue, the affordability housing issue in Nevada?
Of the ACE Act.
Yes.
Yes. So basically, over 80% of the land in Nevada is federally controlled. In order for us to accelerate the building of housing, you have to, we call it dispose of the land and make it available for development. If a developer were to come in to do that, they have to get an appraisal on that land. Right now, private appraisers cannot operate across state lines. And all my bill does is reduce that red tape. It doesn't cost the federal government any money. It just says, you know what, if you're an appraiser in Utah, you can come appraise land, federal land here in Nevada. So just it's one of those barriers that prevents and slows down the development of land so we can get it on the market for housing. And I was very proud that Governor Joe Lombardo endorsed the bill. So it shows, and it is a bipartisan bill. I introduced it with Dave Joyce from Ohio, a Republican, and I'm hoping we get it across the finish line and we start to, just eliminate one more barrier.
And I said interesting dynamic because Republican Governor Joe Lombardo publicly endorsed this bill. You are a Democrat, but he's also endorsing that potential opponent we discussed, Marty O'Donnell. Your thoughts?
That's right. Well, listen, he's the leader of the Republican Party in Nevada. Republicans they look at this seat as their best shot for getting a flip of a seat here in Nevada. So they're going to put all resources into doing that.
Representative Susie Lee, thank you for joining Nevada Week.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. For any of the resources discussed, go to our website, vegaspbs.org/Nevada Week. And a quick programming note, starting June 6th, Nevada Week will air Thursday nights at 7:30.